Welcome. My name is Greg Lecker, and today is the third installment of the Arctic Circling Back, which is my year-long exploration in the studio of my journeys in October 2022 on the Antigua in Svalbard, Norway. I will be developing a new body of work based on or inspired by my field studies in Svalbard, Norway. It was a once-in-a-lifetime visit to this archipelago in the Arctic Ocean, about midway between the mainland of Norway and the North Pole. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so this was, we're at 45-degree north latitude here. We're roughly halfway between the equator and the North Pole, where my studio and where I live. And where we traveled from about 78 degrees north latitude to 80 degrees north latitude. We were just, I get the exact number, but maybe 800 miles from the North Pole. We were, like I said, midway between the north coast of Norway and the North Pole. It's an area where many of the explorers departed for the North Pole. I'm going to switch cameras now, mostly doing demonstration. You're not looking at my face then. So you'll be seeing my desktop here, literal desktop, not just computer desktop. And today we're doing work in Scratchboard. Scratchboard, you can make your own, but I just ordered in packs of 25. I can't recall the manufacturer here. But I'll be demonstrating the different steps involved. It's a white glossy material that then has been coated in a black matte material. And it's a very consistent material for the act of actually doing the work. I selected some different images from the photographs that I had taken. And I should say my journey was mostly funded. Well, it was half funded by my own funds, and then funded by the Arctic Circle .org, which is an organization. It's fairly competitive, but folks apply each year, and then you are selected, and if selected, then you get to journey with a bunch of other artists. We were about 26 artists and 11 crew members. The crew included our guides, our cooks, the captain, first mate, second mate, first mate's girlfriend, and everyone really pulled together, even the artists, with regards to some of the sailing that we were doing. It was the three-masted barkentine vessel. We were very fortunate to sail most of the time under sail, under wind, although we did have engines as well. And because we had good wind with us, we covered a lot of land. I'm going to turn these around for your benefit. These were some of the images that I selected as potential candidates for what I would be demonstrating today and exploring then over probably the next month. And for this demonstration, I'm leaning towards doing this image, and then probably also a little bit of this image. So you will see step by step how I approach this. Yes, you can freehand draw on the Scratchboard, or you can just draw just abstract shapes or whatnot on it to scratch into it. But I find that it's easier to do the transfer. And again, with the funding, I started and then I stopped. This series of demonstrations that I'm doing, and then the video that I will produce at the end of the year-long exploration, is being funded by the Minnesota State Arts Board. Our state, Minnesota, is very supportive of artists, and I'm a fiscal year 2025 recipient of a Creative Individuals Grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board. This activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. This is a bill stating state sales tax, and it was voted on uh, by the voters of Minnesota more than 10 years ago. And we're very fortunate. So again, we're going to be transferring the image onto this to be able to draw onto it. And to do that, I'm using a white chalk. It's from my box of Derwent Inktense blocks that I used when I was in. This is not the actual box, but it's the product that I used when I was in Norway to do some sketches. And I use most of the colors. I don't actually use the white when I'm there because it's watercolor I'm working on paper, but it's very handy that the white is what I don't use there, but it is what then I would use to transfer. So you just rub the back of your paper with the chalk, and then this has been pre-applied, so it's mostly done. I had ordered a kit. In the kit that I had ordered, and frankly, with the scratch boards, they came with a number of these white stylus and then some scratching tools and a brush and this half glove, which I will be demonstrating once I get into the actual scratching, and I'll demonstrate why that's useful. But here we take the material, and again, I'm flipping it over for the benefit of you all watching, and I'm going to transfer this. And I've tried ballpoint pen in the past. I found that this is somewhat useful. So you're just transferring the lines. It's up to the artist how much a person wants to transfer, how much detail there is, whether one is painting or one is drawing, getting the massing, getting the general shapes seem to be the hardest, placing them on the paper. I find that doing the actual detail is very relaxing, especially with this Scratchboard. Get into a Zen mode. And there can be even just some subtle scratching. I don't really want, you'll see how it's transferring some general lines going there. And not to bore you, but I've already done a Scratchboard with the major shapes on it, and so that saves time because an hour really goes very fast. So, and you're seeing somewhat the lines that are there. It's easier for me to see them probably than you're seeing on the camera, but you will see the scratching going on here. So, and I mentioned this tool or this half glove. It's set up so that your oils and whatnot are not going onto the paper. So put your hand through it. And it's really just something you can rest your palm on the material, and you're not messing it up. So again, I'm going to have and some of the other materials here that came with this kit were a couple styluses. These happen to have a wider tool on one side and then a sharper tool on the other side. And I'll demonstrate how that works. I often used this point. This isn't it. Yes, it is sharp. You can certainly poke someone with that. So hopefully you can see both. But then we've got this, and one can, with a lot of things, you're focusing on a variety of marks. And I'm going to be working from the bottom to the top away from me so I'm not getting my fingers so much into the piece. And it's good to keep in mind what is the basic shape of some of the subjects that you're seeing. Here we're seeing the ripples of the water. However, I have found that tool that is a bit finer and one that works great are just simple paper clips, believe it or not. Um, I've heard of artists that do um, get some scratching, get some tools that are sharpened or whatnot. Um, there can be um, cross hatching, linear hatching. I often find it's somewhat useful to have some general line work um, going across, and one can turn the tool, turn um, the paperclip different directions to get different tools, different shapes, I should say. Um, but by varying the kind of the speed or the pressure, one can get thinner, one can get thicker lines. The variety of the lines that seem to help convey some of the differences. And I've played with this camera slightly, but no substitute to being actual live. But you'll see this evolve as it goes along. Um, it's useful to see some of the bright lines show up. We're actually looking at this area here. Um, and like I said, you can turn the tool different directions, and I'll show some of the. This is certainly easier to hold, and I've done both. The um, both the paper clips and some of the other ones. It's sometimes it's good to try some different types of mark making. And some of these large shapes might be the more interesting, or the large patterns that are going on. In choosing the subject, it's handy to use something that um, has a bit of contrast, not something that is very subtle. This is not painting, this is not drawing. So you're looking at um, very broad images. High contrast, I should say, in terms of what works the best. And this view actually was in Longyearbyen before we actually even boarded the ship. There were some beautiful hiking areas, mountains that the archipelago is very mountainous. And so you have a lot of, and you can see the paper does have some sheen on it itself. What I'm doing does not have to be an exact representation of the work involved, but to get the gist, get the semblance of what we're looking at. Um, Mostly doing hatching now rather than cross hatching. Um, I suppose it is possible to lay the tool on its side and carve out a little bit more of an area. Built. That's certainly a way. And then moving up into the sky. With regards to the sky, sometimes it's nice to have a straight edge to be able to um, have some consistent lines so that there's some contrast between the straight lines and the straight lines of the background and the um, that create more of a gray scale, and then the larger areas that are going to be the white that one sees in this area. For this, I'm it's just going to be easier if I can turn it around. Not so much that I know what's going on, but I want to keep my lines parallel as much as possible here. And maybe having another panel. I'm using my painting panels here as my straight edges. If you're familiar with my painting, you'll see my panels that I paint on, which are um, toned on one side. I have some tape here. I'm going to just tape the Scratchboard down. So I'll do it from the bottom since I'm going to be working on the sky. I don't think it will pull up the black, but we'll find out. Um, in some regard, there are some parallels in, I'll say, possibly in printmaking or engraving in a way, with regards to the lines that one has going across. I'm okay if it breaks up somewhat. So I'm trying to create a grayscale background on which I'm going to be drawing the or carving out the areas that are more white. And I'm just going to slowly slide this down. And I have practiced on some other scratch boards for some of the, if you go to my website, greglecker.com, and look up Arctic, you'll see scratch boards that are completed or folks that have seen it in the gallery. And this is just to create something that I don't want the gray part of the sky to be really attracting a lot of attention. I just want it to be a background, something that is lighter than a lot of the landscape, which is primarily dark. Drawing across the whole element. You can see what's going on in terms of the um, hatching that is creating light. And the sheen of the white is somewhat useful for the um, some interest in the piece. In the past, I've done some smaller scratch boards, but this is certainly an easier demonstration for folks to see. Hey, if it skips a little bit, I want to keep in mind the mountains and not go over the mountains because I want to preserve them as dark. Again, useful to know, have some preview of what I'm doing so I don't run into the um, taking out the mountain areas. And the real magic will come when I bring in some of the brightness of um, the light that's burning through the clouds. So this is all representing the cloud. And I may go in and do some patterning, other curves and whatnot, but because I'm trying to get a more consistent, and I'm going to turn this over. I just don't want the textured side to be scratching the scratch board unintentionally. I'm just noticing I'm learning along with you. And it's a black and white. If you've seen the last painting, it's black and white or bluish grayish white. The idea is to hopefully simplify the compositions. Um, Maybe it becomes more into shapes. Um, there can be some freehand here as I get closer to the mountains. I don't remember exactly what all the underlying shapes are. Um, Could be easier to stroke away from the mountain, I suppose. Again, learning along with all of you. I might just show, um, I've been able to get some fine lines with the paper clips. Um, Sometimes it's thicker lines. When I go to some of the clouds, I may be doing some of that. Some of my other scratch boards, the paper clips that work better. I suppose it probably depends on how close I have my face and whatnot to the material, how much control I can exert over the paper clip versus the stylus here. But I understand that the stylus does wear out in time. So it's possible that even just some cardboard slides along the paper more easily than the canvas board. After I have a general layout, then I may go back in and brighten some of these areas. And with these, then I'll be doing a variety of different lines, not just the same pattern that I had before. The um, the different clouds that one is seeing. I guess in this regard, it's really the light going through the clouds. Um, May take some still shots here and there as I go, just so that folks that are not watching the video can still see what's going on. When I post. And then, and I did not transfer every single thing of these planes, but I'm going to be suggesting them as I go along. And so I will be looking back and forth between the mountain and the actual. And one can draw a line, or one can suggest it with regards to where another crosshatch stops. So that's a little bit of making up as I go along here. I just need just some distance. I do want to see how this is working for me. Um, if it gives me some marks that are a little bit less planned, that's okay. More variety than the stylus, for instance. And I'd found that I could get some finer lines with some of the edges of the paperclip than I could with the stylus. I don't know. Maybe there are. I've heard some scratchboard artists sharpen a nail or a pin to be able to get some finer marks. I'm seeing some, as long as maybe it makes a difference as to which direction or which edge of the paperclip that I'm using. And probably not pressing down just too hard. The finer lines suggest the notion of the further away. Yes, I believe that I'm getting some finer lines here with this than I could get with the stylus. It's sometimes it's just a feel. The fact that I'm using probably the springiness of the paper clipping held in this pattern so it can actually flex a little bit. That's okay. It works to my advantage here for creating um, some of the varying marks that I want to get with the paper clip versus the stylus. The difference between this and some of these. And for the demonstration here, I'm um, working on all over. Maybe it's not quite as detailed as it will be when I do some work afterwards, but I want to be able to show you some of the different mark making these bigger areas of white that are carved out. And there is a difference between these marks and this mark where it was the stylus turned on its side for creating the illusion, especially of the sheen in the water. I feel like that probably um, creates some of that illusion. And as I'm looking here, I feel like I want to restate some of these things, some of these wider areas. Um, and yes, you can ink afterwards, but I've not done that before, and I'm going to try not to do something like that. It's just take away if it's a little bit different shape, that's okay. The benefit here is this is not a portrait. It does not matter that it is not an exact representation of what one is seeing there. These ripples are not going to be there again. It changes. Um, and that's all right. It's useful to vary the curves to be able to suggest where one is working on an area. Apologies, I need to rotate this back. And the brush is useful for what you're just seeing going on here, where always the black has to go that you're scratching off has to go someplace. Blowing on it, I suppose, works as well. This is a really soft. It's not going to scratch the paper. So back towards putting it your direction. As you can see, and I will rotate this again that direction. Might slide this underneath here. So to bring out some of the, I feel like there's some light that needs to be brought into the sky here. And maybe it's turning this a little bit to create some variety in terms of brightness here and there. Where it will actually obscure some of the cross hatching. And there's some illusion that can be created with regards to how these different lines interact with the previous lines that you had, and even the variety here of a brighter line, brighter edge, I should say, where the sky is brighter that dives down behind the mountain, I think works well for creating the illusion of light coming through clouds here. It's a learning experience in terms of what one is doing, one's creating. And mostly during this year of exploration, I'm doing mediums different than my primary medium is painting, oil painting. There are times over the year that I had worked a lot with watercolor and less so with oil. It taught me some about creating a softer appearance, softer edges, which I think I've probably transferred into um, my oils. Maybe these are a little bit smaller areas, but still something that there's some contrast here and there. I feel like there's a little bit more of a dip here where it's just ever so slightly brighter. It comes across something that helps to not just be a strict outline of the mountain, which is why I did not draw the outline of the mountains with a white line. That would have felt artificial. This is a way to, that mountain is some distance away, and so I want to be able to suggest that something that is not a hard edge would make it appear like that mountain is much closer. That's not true. That would be quite some distance. Um, so just continuing with going back again to the paperclip that I am liking because of some of the effects that I could get with regards to these planes. Um, Sometimes it's learning exactly how rotating it is going to work. It's a feel, something that I can't convey exactly in the video here. The feel of the paperclip um, against the material. And then maybe going back into these ripples um, of the sun on this water, just looking at some different effects that I can get instead of these itchy, scratchy lines. Um, and maybe this is where the stylus is going to work better, so that I can vary it from a thin line to a thicker line and then back down to a thinner line. Something that with the brush would be easy to do, or even a palette knife. Um, it is easy to do with this, but it can be done, just an acquired skill. Stylus as close to the paper as possible so that I can easily change from holding it or opposed to the paper and then laying it down so I can scratch in a bigger area and then down. And you will not get the same effect with if you were to um, scratch out over and over again. Maybe I'll try to demonstrate on over here with regards to now the here, I'm okay with it being textured, but if I just do something over and over again and take out a bigger area, it's not feeling the same as this. Hopefully you're seeing that. Um, so I'm wanting to suggest some of the texture of the gravel that is here. Um, I feel like this is not exactly horizontal. I mean, it is horizontal, but it's um, varying somewhat. There are some planar shapes here and there that have harder edges, and then some where it maybe does go back. Stippling, it's something that a person can do. I think I found that that worked better with the paper clip than it did with the stylus. Some other elements. This edge, one does want to bring out somewhat. Trying to remember exactly where some of the lines were transferred. Um, so I don't want a hard edge there. I'd like to have a softer edge. Um, Tricky bending the paperclip into exactly the tool that one wants. It's tough with some of the glare here to see, am I actually scratching off or am I just burnishing with black? Um, I have not tried a needle to see how that works, um, but that might be something that would be useful to try. Get some more, a little bit more detail potentially. Um, how these ripples are definitely a harder subject to try to convey in the scratchboard than they have been when I've done painting. But this notion of the variety, changing the line from one to the other, may be something that I can use when I'm painting in palette knife and in a scratchboard. It's not something that I have um, rigorously done in my brushwork, but I'm liking some of the effects that I'm getting here. Um, there's some diffraction and refraction that is going on with parallel lines that can be useful both for painting as it's probably even more evident with regards to the scratchboard. Um, Bit of sheen here again, and I'll do that. Not certain. I feel like it's more horizontal lines versus the curving that is here. And there's no covering up once you've scratched it off. You've made your marks. Um, the stippling might be good for creating a different type of effect. It's definitely a laborious process where you're slow, little by little by little, taking out some of the material and creating an edge. Really concerned about the paper is fairly thick. I'm not concerned about going through the paper. It's certainly not tearing it. It's more durable than that. Keeping in mind this band um, of material and trying to convey that. Uh, it can be easy to lose your place because you're looking at one source and looking at the other. And in some drawing courses that I've taught, the notion of making as many different types of marks as one can, which creates more interest for the eye to look around. This is really a drawing exercise, so there is much more variety. I shouldn't say variety in mark making, but there's line. Yes, there's some areas that it's more shape here, whatnot, but folks will be seeing the lines that you're creating when you're doing scratchboard. So I concentrate on that. And here I feel like there's some planes that are going on. The rock has been freeze thawed, cycles into different uh, I don't know, parallelograms or planes. Um, there's some scratching that has gone on with regards to the glaciers, but I don't want this to be as light as this, so I'm going to probably just allow it to be black there. And certainly there's a contrast between this area being black and this area. So again, still having the contrast between the lighter here. So I feel like this edge does need to be brightened more, but just that it doesn't get as bright as this. So looking at exactly how that can be done, I think smaller lines here and there. And it may be more like just Not going into it in great detail. Um, Maybe these need to be further apart and going different directions. Again, I've not done this specific subject before close-ups of the rocks, but um, so I'm learning along with you. And maybe it's good as I'm learning along here, just trying to vary, and maybe I'll go back to this to see if I can get some short square shapes here and there that can represent these odd rock things, or maybe even some little circles here and there to represent some of the other shapes. But trying to concentrate on going to black here and lighter here, but not so light that it is fighting with this edge. Maybe another still image here. I'll probably work some more with this in the studio where I can have it turn my direction so I can see it. Make sure that I'm getting uh the right feeling for the shapes. It's going to be as much of a discovery for me when I turn this over for myself. Sometimes viewers imagining what is there. I want to concentrate on smaller marks back here, larger marks in the foreground. Still keeping it planes. I'm seeing not just still having maybe some variety or some direction, not just an overall pattern that would not be natural. Nature does create patterns with regards to how the water washes up to here and doesn't cover all of this. So there's some areas that are more wet looking, which gives that sheen, but then also dies off a little bit as a rock goes backwards. The eye and the brain has to work together to when one is looking at the scratchboard to create the illusion of the grays here and there and the lights. I might go back here and just bring out a little bit of brightness in some regards to the with this ripple. And maybe it's as simple as connecting a shape across. Waiting to see, yeah, there's no way that this how large that whole area is. I feel like this has to be that brighter edge along here. Whether or not that's where it was when I transferred it, I do not know. Um, but um, just doing some corrections to keep this line as being something that goes along. I definitely don't want to break this area up very much because that was very black. This could be somewhat broken up with some lines, but very small. I don't want that to get so bright that it's fighting with some of the midtones. I want it to be mostly dark, but maybe not quite as black as this. Person can go in and do a lot of detail, even break lightening up some of these areas so that it does not feel like what this area feels like compared to these, compared to this, compared to this. Um, can be a bit of a challenge. Some more cross hatching here and there. Um, maybe it's carving out more of an area there. Don't want to overdo it with the white. Um, so, but maybe bringing out this shape a little bit more. I know I um, failed a little bit to get this as elegant as some of this area here. Maybe a subsequent Scratchboard that is done that creates that. Because that was one of the things that drew me to selecting this photograph versus some of the other photographs that I had. But that's all right. It's it's not a photograph. This is not a photograph. It's creating some poetry here and there. Maybe a lot more um, dotting that's going on to create some. That's very laborious. Not something that I'm expecting anyone to want to watch to get a whole area done like this, but gives you some indication of what goes on. This is where you could have some good tunes on. Your mind can go off into another subject as you're working on this, and that's okay because as long as you keep and concentrate on this specific area, okay, I'm going to work this area. Um, the exact dots don't matter. It's definitely an area where you're not able to replicate something exactly. Some how this is coming together, this versus this. Not an exact copy, but um, something that replicates what I had seen. Um, there's the that has to be defined here to keep this edge a little bit of lost and found, but still something that goes along. Keep it fine. Keep it. Don't get too white because this is whiter. This is whiter, and certainly this. But this appears like it's white. It's like that actually is not anywhere near as white as this. This is definitely this could be um, lightened somewhat. I think it's in the few minutes that I have left. Um, take down, take off some more material here. Maybe that's going to help to find that edge a little bit more. I go back and forth between pulling towards me, pulling away. Um, you'll feel as you go along what works, what doesn't, where it makes sense to carve out more versus less. You can create, a brighter white here versus not as white here, but still some um, brighter areas that are connecting this together. You can see there wasn't a lot of time, invested in this, even with the introduction. This is concluding in about an hour. Um, so definitely don't want to keep track of the marks that one is making. You don't want to make furry marks when there's a fine line between something that would be furry versus something different with regards to a mountain versus um, rocks or fur, or the other subject that I was going to possibly demonstrate was like a little bit of plant life on it. It almost felt like it was a kelp of some sort in between some of the rocks. Um, Play with that too. Post post some of the steps here. Again, concentrating on this being bright. You can see it's not always a lot of material that's taken out of this. So I invite you to join me again in another month. Not sure what the medium is going to be that time, but it will be something. Um, so until next time, thank you very much for watching and learning about the Arctic circling back. My Some new bodies of work that are inspired by my field studies in Svalbard, Norway. So there'll be again continued Zoom monthly demonstrations, social media postings. Um, I'm still planning to do an in-person workshop or two in Gallery Imagine. Coming here, that might be a good winter project. I'll get the word out to people, maybe get some other artists in Northrop King building, which is one of the biggest art buildings around. So thank you very much for watching, and um, look forward to sharing again in the future. So I thank you very much for your time.